Recently, Bernie Sanders, he released his criminal justice plan. Essentially, his kind of the way he's going to address, mass incarceration, criminal justice, legalization of marijuana, stuff like that. Stuff that involves, obviously a lot of people being put into jail and stuff unjustifiably. And this is something he's been actually talking about for many, many years. A lot of Democrats have not. Somewhat, in some cases or another, you could say that, like a lot of black lawmakers, African American lawmakers, have been addressing this issue, but not as much as you would hope, and they've definitely gotten criticism for that. Bernie has been very good on this issue. This is something that he was addressing all the way back in the 90s when the crime bill kind of was in debate, and that was under Bill Clinton. So he was very passionate about it back then, and he's definitely wanting to address it right now as well. So I'm going to go over the criminal justice platform that he laid out on his website, which is berniesanders.com, and he has a section for each issue that he addresses. So I just wanted to give you guys the bullet points. It's a very, very long, I wouldn't say article, but it's kind of like a description of, his plan. And I was just going to go over the bullet points with you guys. You guys can check out the, full thing. I'm going to leave the link below in the description box. And we're just going to go over these bullet points and then just kind of kind of go over it and talk about it as we're going through it. So the plan is called, based on the website, the plan is called Justice and Safety for All. And then he quotes Nelson Mandela here, who says, "It is said that no one truly knows a nation until one has been inside its jails." It's a very good quote. So he just gives kind of a brief introduction here, and then let me get onto the specific parts that he explains here. So the first bullet point is end profiteering in our criminal justice system. And that mainly has to do with for-profit prisons, how people, basically go into jail, and then the companies that, own those jails, they profit off of people being in those jails. So especially when it comes to, like I said before, legalization of marijuana. That's a big thing that should happen, because right now it's obviously not legal all over the country, and people just get thrown in jail for even possessing marijuana or even smoking a little bit. So that's happened a lot, especially among the black community and also the Hispanic community as well. So it says, as president, Bernie will ban for-profit prisons, make prison phone calls and other communications such as video chats free of charge, audit the practices of commissaries, and use regulatory authority to end price gouging and exorbitant fees, incentivize states and localities to end police departments' reliance on fines and fees for revenue, remove the profit motive from our re-entry system and diversion, community supervision, or treatment programs, and ensure people leaving incarceration or participating in diversion, community supervision, or treatment programs can do so free of charge. And then the next one is end cash bail. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Just people that are being forced to have to pay ridiculous amounts of bail just to get out of just to kind of have that period of time outside of to be able to obviously be out of jail if they're not obviously, if they committed a murder or something, obviously they're going to stay in jail. But when it just comes to times when they're, the process is kind of on hold, they get to go out on bail. He wants to end cash bail. And then, as President Bernie will, end the use of secured bonds in federal criminal proceedings, provide grants to states to reduce their pretrial detention populations, which are particularly high at the county level, and require states to report on outcomes as a condition of renewing their funding. Withhold funding from states that continue the use of cash bail systems, ensure that alternatives to cash bail are not leading to disparities in the system. The next one is transform the way we police communities. This is a very long one. Basically it just says that the first one says rescind former Attorney General Jeff Sessions' guidance on consent decrees. revitalize the use of DOJ investigations, consent decrees, and federal lawsuits to address systematic constitutional violations by police departments, ensure accountability, strict guidelines, and independent oversight for all federal funds used by police departments, and federal programs that provide military equipment to local police forces. So this was really long. You guys can check out the rest of that one. The next bullet point is, provide more support to police officers and create a robust non-law enforcement alternative response system. And that's also a pretty long one. You guys can check out the bullet points there. Ensuring all Americans due process. That's pretty straightforward. It's just, he says that the criminal justice system is rigged, and a lot of, obviously, profit interests are being put over billion-dollar industries, and like the bail bondsman, as he mentioned, he wants to end cash bail, so that's kind of tied in with that a little bit. A lot of times, he also says that, a lot of times the size of your bank account has a big effect on whether you do go into jail. So, if you're a rich guy, especially a rich white guy, you're some sort of CEO of some bank, you don't go to jail for the crimes you commit. Putting aside people like, Bernie Madoff or something, but like other than that, you pretty much get away with, rigging committing crimes as a white man, as a rich white man, even if you're a rich black man too, in many cases. But a rich white man, many times, a lot of these bankers and stuff, CEOs and stuff, they get away with doing a lot of the things they do, and nothing ever gets done as far as, holding them accountable. And then he says here, he also wants a right to counsel. He wants to ensure accountability and fairness in prosecution. He wants to end mass incarceration and excessive sentencing. And with that, he also wants to abolish the death penalty. Bernie has always been against the death penalty. Way too many politicians are in favor of it. Even somebody like Kamala Harris, which is not surprising, she's flip-flopped on the death penalty. She says she's in favor, but then as Tulsi Gabbard exposed her to be, she's, held somebody in jail, on death row, actually not even in jail, but on death row, which is, you're on death row and then eventually you're put to death, based on the death penalty, process. And she kept that person on death row and, possibly going into death penalty. And she, but then she goes and says, I'm against the death penalty. So, I don't know. She's obviously all over the place on that one. But that's something that Bernie wants to put a stop to, which is very good. He wants to end the war on drugs and stop criminalizing addiction. Very, very good. That's legalizing marijuana. He doesn't want to legalize all drugs, though, which is interesting. I think, and he talked about this on the Joe Rogan podcast a little while back, a couple weeks ago, and he says, no, I don't support, criminalizing all drugs. He probably sees drugs like cocaine and, heroin and stuff like that. I don't know. He sees that as too harsh. I don't know. I don't agree with that, but that's what he believes. I think we should decriminalize and legalize all drugs, and just sell them, as if they're sold anywhere else, just like marijuana is sold. In California, where I live, in this state, you're allowed to go into a marijuana shop and purchase marijuana. Why shouldn't you be able to do that with any other drug? Of course, those are all very hard drugs, but if you, again, as we know, if you keep it illegal and you don't allow it to be kind of on the, allowed to kind of exist on this, normal level of just anything else that's out there, then people are going to end up selling it on the black market, just like they do with, when alcohol was prohibited. So that prohibition of alcohol, people sold it on the black market, and all the gangs and mafia and mob and shit, they all benefit off of that. And that's exactly what's happening with all the other drugs out there, not only marijuana. So that's why I think we should legalize all drugs, legalize, tax, regulate all drugs. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Here it says, treat children like children. Let me just read this part because I want to get into the detail of it. It says, we must end the school to prison pipeline. Black students, even in preschool, are nearly 4 times as likely to be suspended as white students, putting them at greater risk of falling behind and getting caught up in the juvenile justice system. Black and brown students and students with disabilities are more likely to be subjected to exclusionary discipline measures than their peers. When a child is pushed out of school, they lose instructional time and are more likely to become involved with the juvenile and adult justice systems. Let's see the next one. Next one says, reform our decrepit prison system to make jails and prisons more humane. So, I don't know if you guys have seen, there's I believe it's a YouTube clip. I mean, Kyle Kalinske from Secular Talk covered it, but he covered a part of one of Michael Moore's movies where he actually went to Norway and he checked out Norway's prison system, and he checked it out and he saw that it was it was amazing. Going to jail in Norway, it's like you're living like a great life, and you're actually having an experience of, what do they call it? Kind of like you're feeling more wholesome again. You're feeling more, like you're not put into like a solitary confinement. You're not, you're able to kind of adjust, because what they do is, instead of having to put you in solitary confinement, they let you ride bikes around, they let you, play in the yard, and they don't put you on, 23-hour lockdown and stuff like that. They treat you very humanely and allow you to go back into society again as like a normal person, instead of somebody that's disturbed, fucked up, and, just totally just being treated like shit, being treated like, an animal. Not even the ways animals should get treated, but that's how they get treated too. Humans, animals, they don't deserve, nobody gets to be should get treated like that, whether they're an animal or a human. But unfortunately, they end up treating humans like animals, and they treat animals like animals, which is, ridiculous on its face. So, that's something that's going on in a lot of Scandinavian countries. Norway is just one example. I'm sure it's pretty good in a lot of other European and Scandinavian countries as well. So that's something that Michael Moore covered in one of his movies, and I remember watching it. Ever since I watched that, I was like, damn, that's the kind of system we need in America. And that's something that Bernie wants to, he wants to make existing in this country too. And that's, that's great. I think that's a great thing. And he wants to end solitary confinement, access to free medical care in prisons and jails, living wages and safe working conditions, because a lot of times obviously people that are in jail, they work, and it makes sense to give them a decent wage. Don't give them slave labor, and then just a bunch of other things here. And then the next one is ensure a just transition post release. So it says make expungement broadly available, remove legal and regulatory barriers, and facilitate access to services so that people returning home from jail or prison can build a stable and productive life. That's kind of similar to his idea of reforming the decrepit system and make jails and prisons more humane, because then, again, you don't have to deal with kind of going out to the real world all fucked up, basically. And then here it says, the next one is end cycles of violence and provide support to survivors of crime. It says stop the cycle of violence by prioritizing the most serious offenses. Provide adequate support to crime survivors. Reverse the criminalization of disability. So he wants to reversing criminalization. It's kind of talks about... So here, the first part says, is all too often people with disabilities, especially people of color with disabilities, face violence from law enforcement. This requires then just training. It requires accountability. Approximately half of all people who die in police-involved shootings have a disability. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I remember that. There's been situations where they've shot a poor, black man, white man, whatever, that's kind of, he's got some sort of disability. Maybe he's schizophrenic. Maybe maybe he has some sort of a leg injury. Who knows? He can't walk maybe, so he's in a wheelchair. He might be kind of like, he might have some sort of PTSD of some sort, maybe some CTE, head trauma issues. So that causes, obviously, their mental stability to not be very good. So Bernie wants to help you help those people not have to suffer so much, obviously punishment and discrimination from the police, and to be treated in a certain way that they shouldn't be treated. The next one says investing in community living. So he wants to guarantee mental health care to people with disabilities as a human right. He wants to train, recruit, increase the number of mental health providers to provide culturally competent care in undeserved communities. Guarantee tuition in debt-free public colleges, universities, trade schools, and apprenticeship programs, and the equity pay gap in higher education attainment for people with disabilities by ensuring all students get the help they need so they're ready for college and receive the support they need when they are in college. Its next one is investing in our communities. He wants to enact a federal jobs guarantee to provide good jobs at a living wage, revitalizing and taking care of the community, pass a $15 minimum wage. Of course, if you ask Bernie, he wants even a living wage, so he wants an even higher wage. But that's a good place to start, I think, for sure. He wants to triple Title I funding, expand the IDEA, invest in after-school programs, and make other major investments in public K-12 education as outlined in our Thurgood Marshall Plan for public education and educators. And that's another one of Bernie Sanders' platforms as well. And pass the Water WATER Act to create a $35 billion annual fund to remove and replace lead pipes in communities throughout the country. So this is just a laundry list of things that he wants to do. That's the last of it there. But Bernie really wants to focus on making the lives of people that have suffered through just years and years of endless trauma, torture, like they said, solitary confinement, people that didn't deserve to go through, don't deserve to go through this kind of lifestyle just because they committed a crime. And I'm not talking about being super nice to like a murderer or something. Nobody's talking about that. Granted, Bernie is in support of allowing the Boston bombers or terrorists and stuff to vote, but that's different than just letting a terrorist go out into the public after he commits a crime, or commits a murder or kills scores of people. Nobody's talking about that stuff. But when it comes to people that have committed honestly crimes that don't they're just kind of petty crimes, right? Non-violent crimes, especially smoking marijuana, or doing some sort of drug and then getting thrown into jail for I don't know how many years because of it. I mean, that's absurd. It's a crazy idea. Anybody that supports that is honestly, you're not a humane person. And obviously we can have a debate about putting people in jail who obviously have committed terrible crimes. That's a different story, though. Nobody's talking about being nice to those kind of people, like I said. But when it comes to dealing with situations where people don't deserve to be thrown into jail for years and years and years on end for doing, very kind of minimal type crimes, such as petty theft and drug crime, drug related crimes and stuff. Yeah, I don't think you should get thrown into jail for that. I don't think you should. I think that should be a very minimum punishment. It definitely shouldn't be jail, and let alone in a for-profit jail and all that stuff. So, and these are all things that Bernie wants to address. And like I said, this is something he addressed many times when he was, debating the crime bill back in the early 90s when Bill Clinton was president. This is something that, Bill Clinton, obviously started under Bill Clinton, got worse under George W. Bush. It's nothing. It hasn't gotten much better now, obviously. It's probably getting worse, if anything, let alone with all the gun crimes. The killings of innocent black and brown people, men and women, let alone people, immigrants being thrown into, detention centers. These are all terrible things that are happening in this country that should not be happening. So, and this is obviously something that Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about. He has not addressed it. He does not care about helping, people of the black and brown community, minorities. He doesn't give a shit. He just wants to treat them like they're nothing. And I don't know how anybody could be in support of that. It's just makes no sense. So thank God Bernie is addressing this, and his plan is very, very extensive, and it's very, very detailed. You guys can read this whole thing. It takes like 40 minutes to read it, 40 minutes to read this whole thing all, in full. And I also want to I'm going to put a link at the bottom in the description box. It's kind of like a roundtable discussion that Bernie Sanders has with, several, people of color who have opinions on the criminal justice system, have possibly been affected by people, have been affected by the criminal justice system. So they're, been in jail. They've, suffered, suffered what they shouldn't have suffered. And, he sits there and, they recorded it for, I think it was Bernie Sanders' official YouTube page, I believe. And they put it up there. So I'm going to post that in the description box. You guys can check that out. So, yeah. So, hopefully this is something that will definitely help Bernie Sanders, climb up in the ranks as far as, and he's already obviously one of the top candidates right now, certainly top 3 or 4 at least, depending on which polls you look at. But he's definitely the most progressive, and he's, definitely got one of the best, if not the best, name recognition next to Joe Biden, who's not doing well right now. So, Bernie can definitely take advantage of that, and I think he will.